And for the streamers, you can type your questions into the chat and we're going to help monitor that and feed that back to the panel. We'll do our best to cover as many of those as possible, but it's all valuable if you think we've missed something. With that in mind, over to you, Sharon.
Thank you very much. Thanks very much. Thank you for hosting this as well. It's no mean feat putting this together in such short notice, so thank you very much. So I'm going to introduce myself first of all. I'm Sharon O'Connor. I retrained as an upholsterer 13 years ago and started my business nearly 11 years ago. Like a lot of people, like everyone, I was told the fire regulation rules, adopted them, put them into practice and didn't really question them 13 years ago. In the last few years, I certainly have been starting to question them as I'm getting more knowledge about toxins in the home. So I think this is really is our opportunity to have a voice and to respond passionately about our businesses, and this meeting tonight is another opportunity to air all of the concerns and issues, positives and benefits, and take it from there. So let's introduce the panel first of all. So you want to go first, Wendy?
Yeah, I'm Wendy Shorter Blake. I'm an upholsterer and a trainer for the past 28 years. And I'm currently Chair Emeritus of the Association of Master Upholsterers, and I'm currently representing the reupholstery sector on the Trading Standards Institute FW6 committee, which you will ultimately have to write the standards once these regulations come into law.
Hi, I'm Matthew Freeman and former president of the British Institute of Interior Design. Got my own interior design practice and I focus on sustainability and sort of wellness indoors and circular economy. So the use of chemicals and well-being is a big part of what I do, and trying to make healthier homes that are not full of chemicals is the sort of angle I'm coming from. So, thank you.
Hi, I'm Delyth Fetherston-Dylke, and first career was I spent 18 years as a lawyer, and then second career is 10 years as an upholsterer, and the last 3 years has been a lot of time spent deep diving into this area.
Robbie?
Right, hello. I'm Robbie Richardson. I run Richardson & Page. I've been an upholsterer for 40 years, and I am just a humble upholsterer who has sort of views and opinions on this whole shit. So that's what I'm doing here.
Thank you very much. So we've got lots of questions here, and these are the questions that have been raised through social media. So social media has been incredibly active over the last 2 weeks, which has been amazing. And there's a lot of very similar questions coming through. So we've collated them and we're going to go through them. Let's start, first of all, with the introduction. Why are we here? How did we get here?
Okay, well, the regulations came into force in 1988, and they periodically have to be reviewed. The last review started about 2014, and there was a consultation. It went back, and now they're redrafting the legislation. So this current consultation is exactly that. They've drafted the laws, potentially what we've got to do, but it's come to us as everybody who has an interest in fire regulations, whether that be upholsterers or chemical companies or manufacturers, retailers. We now have our chance to say what the implications are for us as a reupholstery sector, and we need to express our voices, because potentially, if we don't, these regulations will go forward, and then we will have no alternative but to comply with them. So it's very important that we all respond in some shape or form, and to explain to them, because what you have to realise is that the people that draft these regulations, they're not experts in our field or in any of the fields. They are fed information, they draft the regulations, and now it's up to us to say, well, that's all very well, but it doesn't quite fit, and then to explain how and why it doesn't fit and what we can do to hopefully make it fit for us.
And to remind everyone, we've got until October the 24th to put all of these responses in. There will be work, it doesn't stop after October the 24th, does it, Delyth? We are going to be carrying on, we're all going to be carrying on. campaigning to get the rules changed, so we will be talking to MPs and press and trying to get as much awareness about this subject. But October the 24th is a critical date for responding to the actual consultation. So let's start with the first question. I'm not sure if we just covered it actually. Why has this work been undertaken? I think we've covered that.
We've done that, yeah. I mean, you know, the next thing is, you know, summary of the changes. It's basically, the way you're looking at it at the moment, there are probably four main things. It's about labelling, for reupholstery, it's accountability, it's, you know, the fire testing, and you know, new furniture, and how we can produce furniture that has less chemicals in it. So
there is, I suppose in the new regulations, once something's been reupholstered, then there should be a fixed label on each item, and then on there it details what chemicals are being used on that piece of furniture. So at the moment, the chemicals that are being made illegal to use. In future, you don't know which ones might then fall into that category. So in future, a reupholsterer will know if they get a piece of furniture and it's got a label that they need to be careful because it's got X, Y, and Z in there, which was only found out in 10 years' time maybe that is detrimental to health.
Will the proposed new legislations bring more toxins into our home and workshops?
Not necessarily. So the hope and the intention of the government, and the intention is good, their intention is to reduce these chemical flame retardants. They recognise they're toxic, in fact so much so that they now insist we incinerate everything that's a waste furniture to try to eliminate these chemicals. Their hope is that furniture will be a bit like free-range eggs, in that they're labelled free-range eggs, and so you choose to buy them, and that brought awareness about the treatment of battery hens. The problem with that approach is it's got very, very long lead time to getting rid of the chemicals, and it's resting on an awful lot of hope. And it's resting on a lot of hope that companies will, the manufacturing companies, will choose to take all of the work and design that is needed to try and design a piece of furniture that passes this test. And that will involve a big research and development department and money being spent and sending a chair off for burning. Now, I really hope that the manufacturers will do that, but the way it's drafted looks to me like it's already been negotiated down. It's an obligation on manufacturers if practicable, and that really means if they can't afford to do it, or if it might cost them a bit more to build a chair without chemicals, that's a defence to carry on with business as usual. And from my perspective, I do not believe we should be putting more chemicals out into the environment that we know are toxic, that we know cause harm. It's just a growing problem, and we should be stopping it now.
And that was highlighted beautifully at Decorex.
Yeah, so Professor Andreas Kortenkamp, who is a professor of toxicology at Brunel University, came to Decorex, and my goodness, he spoke emphatically, where he said we should not be putting any more of these chemicals out into our world, because they do not go away. They just move. So they move from the furniture into the air, from the air into the dust, from the dust onto our skin, from the dust into the waterways, from the waterways into the fish, because they're attracted to fats, from the fish into the bigger fish, from the bigger fish we eat them back into our bodies. They've been found in mother's breast milk. They're in all of our bodies, and they grow. The quantity of them will grow. And it's not, I don't want to be all terror and horror, because there are lots and lots of toxic chemicals in society, you know, teeth whiteners and Gore-Tex jackets and stain resist treatments and treatment in building foam. But I think if you're putting a chemical out into the environment that is that toxic and causes that much harm, you've got to really, really need it. And I'm not convinced we do.
And it's in 55 million homes as well. It's not like I say, it's everywhere. So it's a massive push, and it involves everybody who owns a home or lives in a house.
I suppose this is a good good time to raise that we have the highest level of flame retardants in the world, or Europe. So we are very strict with our. It's ridiculous how many we have. It's very strict. But the US have adopted a chemical-free version. Some EU countries have developed an EU version, so we could
adopt the American approach,
Yeah.
and that's what was suggested by our own Environmental Audit Committee in 2019. They suggested, let's adopt the American approach. The Americans have tighter weaves on their fabric to ensure smolder resistance. But I think we could go even better than that. I think we could adopt the American approach, but also actually improve fire safety, because nobody wants to lessen fire safety. And we have the most amazing data in this country on fire incidents. And we could use that data and use reports on that data to take practical steps that would have a really meaningful impact on the fire statistics. And we're just focusing just on the chemicals in the furniture.
There are things like sprinklers, and you've got sprinklers and everything. There are certain things you could do. Every new home has sprinklers. There's certain things you can do to
Every
stop
landlord.
fires indirectly.
Yeah,
Or
every
directly
landlord
even.
responsible for the smoke alarms.
Yeah.
Okay. Have the FR chemicals ever been shown how harmful they are to our health when we're exposed to them in the workplace? Because obviously upholsterers are exposed to a lot more of those toxins when we're stripping furniture, cutting fabric, cutting foam. Has there ever been any tests or research?
So the way, before you launch a new medicine, you do human testing. But before you launch a new chemical, you don't. And so what happens is you wait for the scientific studies to start to emerge when they become worried about these chemicals. And that process, the process from spotting a concerning chemical to having it restricted, can be 17 years. Which is a long time.
Very long time. So the decision in January about waste management is not joined up thinking with what's potentially happening with the proposed new fire regulations. So how we're disposing of furniture and then the new fire regulations, the two just don't meet at all in the middle, do they?
But I suppose that relates back to what was announced in January this year with POPs, so perpetual organic pollutants, and the fact that household upholstered waste furniture has to be incinerated and it can't go to landfill because of the chemicals that we used. It's been incinerated, so it changes the molecular structure of the fire treatment, so it turns it into something else, and then you can deal with it. And it's that whole process. And the furniture, like I said, 55 million homes in the country have got upholstered pieces of furniture that have these chemicals in them. It's typically furniture from 1950 onwards. Is that
Yes.
Yeah.
From the introduction
The
of furniture.
introduction.
Yeah. So it's how to deal with all of that furniture, because in the next 50 years, I don't know, we're going to have to deal with a lot of it. But that all came about because in 2012 there was a test in all the waterways in the UK and none of them met the European regulations. So that's why that started and why that was announced in January this year. So that's why all of the waste is being diverted.
And
away
I
from
think
landfill.
my view is that the left hand of the government's not speaking to the right hand. So the left hand is realising we've got a real problem with the toxicity of these chemicals. They can cause cancer, they can cause developmental behavioural problems in children, they can cause problems with metabolism, problems with thyroid. Fill me in on the ones I've missed out, but they are not great.
Infertility was one.
Infertility is a major
Yeah.
one.
And issues with asthma.
Yes.
There's a lot. There's
Yes.
a lot, yeah.
And so the left-hand side of the government is realising this and saying we need to incinerate or waste furniture, but the right-hand side of the government has come out with these regulations which have a stated intention of reducing the chemicals, but when you actually go down to the nitty-gritty, there are no really firm obligations on manufacturers to reduce the chemicals. And that's where I've got a problem with them. And I've really got a problem also with the environmental impact, because we've got a net zero commitment as a country, and yet we're going to incinerate all our furniture, which releases carbon.
It makes no sense.
It makes no sense to worsen this problem.
But also to note as well, they have taken these chemicals from next year out of baby products, so cots, prams and car seats. So they recognise there's an issue.
Yeah.
They've been removed from child products, which I can't believe they're in, but now I've been educated and they're in. And a lot of my customers were shocked about that.
But they're left in single mattresses.
They're
You
left
might
in,
put a child
yeah.
in a single mattress when they're 3.
And babies are on beds and sofas and chairs. So.
And babies are disproportionately affected,
Yeah.
much more so than adults, for a whole host of reasons.
And that's because their immune system and it can't break it down, it's too immature.
They've got an immature metabolism, they haven't got the enzymes,
Yeah.
they've got hand-to-mouth behaviour, they live closer to the floor because they're smaller,
Yeah. So they're picking
they
up
have a
dust
mouthing
particles.
behaviour,
Yeah.
and they're exposed in the womb when their organs are growing, and so there's more impact there. They're exposed through breast milk, and then when they're a baby, they're then exposed with the play mats and all the other things they lie on.
Yeah, there is an interesting fact, if I can remember it. I was at a mattress workshop, and it was a group, like a round table, and yes, Vitro. And they said that day one when you buy a mattress, it meets fire regulations. 8 years later, it doesn't meet the regulations. At some point between when you buy it to the end of its life, the chemicals come out of it, either into you, the bed base, air.
They migrate out because most of them are not chemically bound to the foam. They are just present there, and the foam acts like a bellows when you sit on it, and the chemicals will puff out into the environment.
So that's when you think, why would you treat them in the first place if they don't meet regulations at the end of life? At what point during its life does it start failing to meet regulations?
And why does it
Are you
need to go to
exposing
incineration
people-
if the toxins have gone?
Yeah, and you're exposing
Yeah.
people to those chemicals when you don't, if it wears out after 2 years,
Yeah.
then what's the point?
It's
It's
all-
detrimental health effects.
It's all a big scale of benefit and harm,
Yeah.
and I think just particularly over the last few years, the harm is so clear now, and yet the benefit is just being questioned and being questioned. It was questioned in 2014 when there was the consultation, and they concluded that the flame retardants weren't fit, that the open flame test wasn't fit for purpose in the UK, it didn't work properly. And then we've just had the Fire Brigade Union have their formal record of decisions for the year, where they say that the flame retardants offer negligible benefit.
Wow.
I know.
Wow.
And that they worsen fire conditions.
I was going to say, does it worsen it?
Yeah, because of the when a flame retardant treated foam burns, that exacerbates the production of hydrogen cyanide and carbon monoxide.
So that could be more damaging than
Nasty
smoke.
chemicals.
So, yeah.
Yeah.
So that moves on nicely then to how this is going to affect the upholstery industry. So how will this affect cushions, lighting, curtains and outdoor furniture as a little subsector?
Well, lighting and curtains fall outside the scope of the regulations. Cushions, scatter cushions, if they are greater than basically 45 centimetres square, 18 inches, then they have to
They're being
comply.
introduced now, yeah.
Yeah, they have to comply. But interestingly, pillows don't. And of course your pillow is much bigger than your scatter cushions. So, potentially if you've got a piece of furniture, we know that they're made with, maybe back cushions, seat cushions, and they're very obvious cushions. And then we have other furniture that is a range of scatter cushions. So if they are an integral part of a piece of furniture, that's one thing. You might want to say that those bigger pieces, because they're an integral part, needs to comply. But why decorative scatter cushions that we throw on them? The other interesting thing is that they're saying that furniture that is made pre-1950 falls outside the scope of the regulations, because generally speaking it will have been upholstered with natural fillings, traditional fillings, coir, fibre, hair, and when they're stitched under compression, they smoulder, they don't inflame the way that they do. But if we produce a new frame with exactly the same filling materials and techniques post 1950, it falls in scope. But that's ridiculous, it's illogical, because the only difference is the age of the piece of wood that you're stapling those materials to. So it should be much more about the materials that we're using rather than the age of the frame.
Definitely. How does this affect interior designers?
Well, because of, I suppose, the introduction of circular economy, and we're trying to reuse furniture, a lot of the furniture that we're picking, if it doesn't have a label on it, then we'll have to have it reupholstered. And we don't really want to be throwing things into the waste.
And it's not clear yet whether we're going to have to fully strip back and reupholster, or whether we can add to, and that's obviously going to be much more of a cost, isn't it?
Yeah.
To the customer.
Yeah.
Yeah. Here we go. What happens to furniture that has no fire label? How can a reupholsterer confirm compliance when evidence of compliance was not required or available post 1950s? Does it need to be stripped back to the frame? This is my favourite question. Or can it be reupholstered at all?
Well, unfortunately, this is not clear, and it's not clear in their intentions. What they're basically saying is that post 1950, furniture should have had a label put on it. And if that label is there, and we have to reupholster it or refurbish it, if we strip it down to the frame, we put a new label on to say what we've done. If it's got the original label on it, and we're going to just, take the top fabric off, add a bit of fill in, recover it, then we put back the original label and we add a new label to say what we've done. But that's fine, providing there is an original label in the first place. But as reupholsterers, we have never had to put a label on the work that we do for an individual customer. If it goes into retail sale, we've had to put labels on. But if you come to me and ask me to reupholster your sofa, I don't have to put a label on it. And that's been the situation since the 1950s.
And sorry to interrupt, and also I haven't seen many original fire labels for a very long time, because they either fall off, they get taken off.
Yeah, they're supposed to be permanently fixed, stapled to the frame or in a seam, but they fall off. Children pull them off, what have you. So potentially now, if a piece comes through and it doesn't have labels on it, then the way that the regulation has been drafted is that we would have to strip it down and reupholster it completely and put new labels on it, or it would have to go to incineration. And potentially there is furniture that's the vintage furniture, made in the 1960s, mid-century stuff that's coming through that doesn't necessarily have its labels on. So in theory it works, but in practice it's not going to work fully. And this is where we need to draw their attention to the issue that it is going to cause.
Yeah, this is why the responses are so important, to explain our businesses, so they understand it's an anomaly, it doesn't work. Reupholsterers are asked to obtain information that confirms component compliance before carrying out work, but this information is not readily available and is very difficult to get hold of, even requested. How can we possibly comply?
It's a nightmare. It's a nightmare trying to get information out of manufacturers and suppliers. Currently now, if a specifier comes to us and says, can you confirm, we can go back to the manufacturers or our suppliers and we can ask for a data sheet. The data sheets are very often out of date, so how long should they be? Should they be 6 months old? Should they be 12 months old? I would have said they should never be more than 12 months old. But we have to request them, and it's not easy to get them, and very often they don't want to give them. They give you a specification sheet which tells you nothing. It doesn't tell you the data that you get. And if they're going to put the onus on us that we have to have that information before we do the work, it's going to make it almost impossible. So the onus, I think, has to be on the manufacturers and the suppliers to supply us with that information when we order it. I mean, currently, you know, if you order fabric and you have to have it back coated, it goes to the back coaters and then they send you a certificate to say what treatment it's had. But this has got to happen with all the foams and the polyesters and everything else, you know, that we are having to put in that's got chemical treatments to it. Because polyesters and foam are all petrochemicals, they're all chemicals. It's, you know, it's made with chemicals. So we need those labels up front. You know, we need that information up front, not having to fight for it constantly, because to be quite, it's onerous. You know, I've had experience of trying to get information. Sorry.
So, if they are going to insist that we have the chemicals, then surely there has to be regulation around the chemical companies providing us with that information. Because if we've got to fight for the information, we won't be able to fulfil our obligations, will
Yeah,
we?
well, that's exactly it, and that's what we need to say to them, that the onus to supply this information should be upfront with the manufacturers and the chemical companies, so that they supply us with that information first and foremost, not us having to retrospectively.
I think they don't. I think whoever drafted this doesn't really understand how micro we are, and we are micro. And if you're a DFS, you can make sure you've got the information about the chemicals, because if the person making the fabric for you doesn't give you that information, you'll go elsewhere for the fabric. But we can't do that because there are a limited number of suppliers of our upholstery materials. We can't normally buy in enough bulk to go directly to the manufacturer. So we're really, the information we get is what's offered to us by our suppliers. So we will need that.
But also the admin load, Robbie, you'll have an opinion on this, I'm sure. The admin load on upholsterers is huge, and as small businesses, it's hard enough without having to go through. The admin load, from what I see from the consultation, is very steep, and it's weighted on the upholsterer now.
And that's why, I mean, I'm jumping a bit to the end here, but that's why I think a lot of the problems that these draft regulations throw up for an upholsterer, the lack of understanding the micro business, the completely destroying bespoke products, the completely destroying the 1960s, 70s unlabelled products. A lot of these problems could be solved, I think, by us using an interliner, because the testing, fire safety testing on interliners is really strong, it's really good.
But only with a natural fabric.
Well, again, you see, currently we don't know. You see, current regulations say that if you use have a top fabric of 75% natural fibres, we can use an interliner. And so if you use 100% wool interliner, we can produce, you know, particularly with traditional materials, chemical-free products. So it's really difficult, you know, to.
It's not clear at all.
It's not clear.
No.
We need that information, and the onus has to be on the manufacturer to supply that when we are ordering, not for us to constantly have to chase for it. So, and that needs to be explained to them, because, as I say, these people are not experts and what have you, and it's much easier from a manufacturer's point of view, because when they design a piece, they'll put a specification together, they'll get all that information together, and you know, it'll be held on file. But of course, with us, you know, the combination of materials that we use is different for every customer, you know. So each time a fabric comes to us, have we got to chase that fabric company to know what chemicals in? You know, we can't do that.
I just think, Robbie, I think in practice it would be so difficult and so time consuming, don't you agree?
But the point I think about this is that, and it's a bit harsh what I'm going to say, but people that are in the industry, that care about the industry, will follow all these regulations, and there is an element of people in the industry who just won't bother, and then you're creating a completely different, uneven field of competition, if you like. I think there's a really serious issue around how these rules will be.
Robbie, I completely agree with you, and legislation across the board, if it's simple, it's more likely to be complied with.
That's
Yeah.
what I'm saying.
Yeah.
You're
Yeah.
much better at this than me.
But there has been talk of like digital passports, so each piece of furniture has a QR code and then you log all the information against it. So if you get that chair brought into you, you can scan it and then it tells you.
Oh gosh.
But the paperwork,
Oh,
and this is what AI is
Yeah.
for.
That's an
It's
ideal
skill
world.
and IT competence, isn't it?
Yeah,
Yeah.
I think there's a lot of upholsterers that would fall out of scope for that one.
Yeah.
Yeah, QR codes anyway. Right, impact on furniture dealers, house clearance, antique shops, charity shops, auctions, antique markets. I mean, the whole circular economy.
They've all got to comply. So,
So it's going to be. We did a podcast, didn't we, a couple of days ago, and it was quite interesting. They weren't aware of it. They weren't aware of this new consultation, so it was quite good to raise awareness there with the second-hand market and the circular economy. But it was just shock and horror that we would be potentially eliminating that whole industry with these new
Yeah,
regulations.
so you couldn't sell anything that was post 1950
without label.
because it wouldn't have been, well, you wouldn't have tested it without destroying it to
Yeah.
test it.
Yeah,
And then you'd have to rebuild them, reupholster them, and then the complexity of doing that would push the cost of doing it so high
and then
that
what
you
would
then have to either not sell it or have it incinerated.
and the risk, how I see it, is then we're pushing people to buy from mass manufacturers who can not even work around the rules. They can make furniture that will be chemical free because they've got the money and the development and the budget to be able to do that, and that knocks out the upholsterer. Because how can you say it's really worth reupholstering your second-hand sofa, but that DFS are producing a chemical-free one? Yours will have toxins, but DFS are providing a chemical-free alternative for half the price.
We should probably skip off these questions for a sec just to explain this point, because I think it's a bit tricky, in that for an upholsterer, they realise we can't get in our client's chair, burn it, bring it back from the dead and upholster it. So for us, every layer of the filling has to pass a flame test, and that presents a problem for natural fibres, and it presents a problem that it will be very difficult for us because most of our products will then be treated with chemical flame retardants because it's difficult to pass an individual test and it's easier to pass a whole product burn test. And meanwhile, amongst the manufacturers, my guess is they will split, and some who are ecologically minded may put all the money and research behind creating products that don't have chemical flame retardants. And if it's anything like the mattress industry, the high-end mattress suppliers now are advertising free of toxic chemicals. And I think that will be a really good marketing line. But I fear that for many of the manufacturers, that cost and knowledge hurdle will in the short to medium term be too big, and they'll carry on business as usual because there's no actual obligation in these regulations for them to do anything else. And that means the country is being subjected to more of the chemicals that no one in America is. You know, buying furniture in America, they're not subjected to these, and buying furniture in Europe, they're not subjected to anything like the same amount we are, and that just feels wrong.
Yeah.
It sounds like an opportunity for the government to put some money into funding and training and sorting out the problem they've caused.
Oh, that's a thought. That's a spicy thought.
And that definitely wasn't on here.
No! Can a customer have a choice about what goes into their home?
The really positive thing in these regulations is the labelling. It is so positive because the hope is it will give customers a choice, and they will be able to read the label, say, oh, I see there's toxic chemicals in that, I'm going to choose not to buy from there, and hopefully over time they will move towards toxic chemical free furniture. But can they have a choice when they come to us? No,
No.
because our hands are tied because every layer has got to pass. So I think this is making it harder for us to create toxic chemical free furniture than it is now.
I mean, at the moment, the natural materials are not tested. Natural fibre materials are not tested, and we don't want them to start testing. So, and you know, they've recognised that, you know, these natural materials, if they're in pre-1950s furniture, they're less of a fire hazard because of their nature and how we produce them. But as I said earlier, if we put them onto a brand new frame, then potentially we've got to add interliners, or depending on the choice of your customer's fabric, it's got to be back coated. Whereas if we can use interliners, we can potentially produce furniture that doesn't have chemicals in the traditional way, traditional materials. So
also dating a piece of furniture from 1959 to 1949 to 1951. It's an interesting topic, but we don't need to go into that one tonight.
Well, it's really difficult because you think it's the 1950s, and sometimes when you strip it down and you find actually it was made in 1939.
Yeah.
You think, well, okay, that falls outside the scope, but but the onus is then put on to us to make that decision. When was it? Okay. The theory is that if it was made post 1950, it would have a label. But as we've just sort of said, there is hundreds of pieces of furniture, thousands of pieces of furniture, hundreds of thousands of pieces of furniture out there that doesn't have labels.
And there's hundreds of thousands of pieces of furniture that are imported from Europe that don't have a label as well.
Well,
so that's
technically they're supposed to.
But yeah. Okay. What does this mean for micro businesses versus manufacturing? Because that's always the competition, isn't it, as an upholsterer?
I think we've already addressed the fact that it's going to be hard for us to compete on the claim that our furniture is toxic chemical free. But secondary to that is quite a few upholsterers make bespoke products where we work with a carpenter on a frame and we build a footstool, build a headboard, build a chair. And at the moment the regulations are completely silent on these, and therefore the only way to read them currently is that we're treated the same as a mass manufacturer and therefore have to do a full product burn. And I think they need to actually look at us as a micro business and work out how to deal with it. And the same for very small furniture.
So if a customer asks you to make a headboard with the proposed regulations, we would have to send that away for incineration, prove it was fire safe, and then make another one.
Yeah.
Well,
But that's, we do think that is an anomaly though. We do think that's ambiguous. So.
Yeah.
But is that like a 300 by 300
No.
composite? You've got
It's
to
a
do the
full
whole thing.
Test.
Yeah.
I'm not certain. No, you can make a sample, but as long as it's got the appropriate fillings. Because currently when they do a test, they don't do it on the actual armchair. They do it on a model frame, but it has to have all the full components.
Either way, it's going to be massively financially difficult. I.e., an upholsterer can't do it. So.
But it doubles the cost. No, it more than doubles
Yes,
the cost.
yes,
So,
yeah. And who absorbs that cost?
Yeah,
The upholsterer or the customer? It probably won't be the customer. Right, moving on to what now? And that's why these responses are so important, because as we're picking up all these anomalies, to talk to these responses and how we're communicating back about this draft consultation is so important that we get these points across so that it's clear in huge numbers they've misunderstood the upholstery industry. What do we hope will happen if the legislation gets enough responses?
Well, we hope that they'll redraft it, taking into account the issues that we're raising. At the moment, what is the definition of bespoke? There is no definition of bespoke. And as we know, some of the larger manufacturers will call their work bespoke, because you can choose to have that sofa as a 2-seater or a 3-seater in this fabric or that fabric.
Yeah.
But it's still made, mass produced, and it's still made on a production line, so we need them to know, to sort of specify, what bespoke means, because what we do and what, interior designers do is we make bespoke furniture. We take individual pieces, we reupholster it individually, we reupholster it as new, and then it is produced for an individual customer.
Yeah, we were saying maybe multiples of up to maybe 12 of the same thing should be counted as bespoke.
Yeah.
And then anything more than that, then it becomes a sort of mass-produced item.
But
That's
just
a
finish-
definition.
Sorry, just finishing this question. We have had one meeting with the government department on this, and they said the weight of your response matters.
Yeah.
And that means the quantity of us who are responding.
What would you say, Robbie? How would you feel the sort of atmosphere is at the moment? Would you say that we're going to be getting? What's your feeling about the responses? Are you feeling there's going to be a huge uptake from what you're hearing? Oh, we've lost Robbie. We've lost Robbie. Right, we'll move on.
He's asleep.
Hi, Robbie.
I didn't really hear what you said, sorry.
What's your views on the eagerness for people to respond in their hundreds of thousands? We can always hope.
Unfortunately, I think there's mixed response because there are people out there, sadly, who don't think it will affect them.
And that's what we're trying to highlight tonight, that it does affect everyone.
But the reason they think that is because there's a lack of understanding and education around it.
Mm-hmm.
And to be fair, Robbie, it is so complicated.
Yeah.
And
Yeah,
it
massively so.
it is almost as if the way you click on the Smarter Regulations page, and first of all they say, oh, there's a new review. Well, that's 150 pages. And then they say, and here's the consultation document. Well, that's 49 pages. And then they say, and here's the impact assessment of the financial impact. That's another 40 pages. And then the only bit that actually matters is the draft regulations, which are another 40 pages. And then if you actually read a document that really matters, which is called Characteristics of Domestic Fire Safety, that's another 150 pages. And none of those actually tell you these answers. We're kind of pulling these answers from what we've read and trying to dissect what we think the government is intending to do. But it's a draft one. It's imperfect. It's got holes, it's got things missing, and it's got really big ambiguities, like what do we do if a customer comes to us with a chair and it's got no fire label on it and it's post 1950? Currently, we're not clear what this document says about that. So,
Sorry, I know this is an unanswerable question, but I'm going to answer it anyway. Why do they have people sorting out these regulations that have no understanding of our industry?
The people that are drafting it, they're taking information. They're taking the information from various people on the BSI FW6 committee, and they're looking at the regulations. And
Sorry, who is that committee?
Could you explain what that is?
Yeah.
We spoke a lot of numbers.
Yeah, but BSI will have to, once the regulations have been finalised, once government has decided, then the British Standards Institute, they will have to write the standards as to how we can make everything compliant. They'll write to say, you know, if this happens, you've got to do this, that, and the other. Okay, so there are various. It's a large committee. There's over 40 people on the committee, and they are from all sort of walks of the industry and the sector. So there's mass-produced manufacturers. There's representatives from the baby products. There's fire chiefs, yes. There's obviously, the people that do the testing, retailers, furniture manufacturers, consumer interest, cancer prevention, there's the testing houses, bed manufacturers, trading standards, they're all sort of putting their input in from their points of view. And then the people that are drafting the legislation, they pull all that together and then come up with this draft. And now it's come out to consultation, and it's then up to us to say, well, that's fine, but it's not quite working, and trying to explain to them how and why it's not working, and perhaps how they can make it work for us.
Happy with that, Robbie? Happy with the answer?
Well, yeah, except for all of that list you read out, not one upholsterer was mentioned. But
No, that's me. That's me, But there are not multiples of these people, so it's not as if the mass-produced manufacturers have got lots of people. They're not represented by lots of people. Okay, so Alright.
And you wouldn't have expected them to get it right on draft one.
No.
But what we've got the chance to do
It's the change.
is to change that.
Yeah.
And the more we can actually tell them about how our business runs, you know, this bespoke area that you're killing is 15% of our business. The number of chairs that arrive with no fire label on them is another 67% of our business. That sort of information, or just saying, you know, in the last 6 months, I've had this many sofas come in without fire labels, I would have lost that business.
Yeah, that's that kind of
Those
responses.
facts, those hard facts are really important, really valuable.
What other solutions are there? So we're talking about, like, this is draft one. What we would, the ideal scenario is to go to the US Moulder test, isn't it? The chemical-free furniture, simplicity in the rules. Is that what other alternatives are there for these rules?
Well, in Europe, they haven't got an overall European rule. They've got disparate rules in different countries, but they don't, for domestic furniture, have the open flame test. Now, we have an open flame test, and what really kind of hits me a bit in these regulations is we've got this open flame test, and that requires, largely historically has required chemicals, the flame retardant chemicals, to meet it. The Americans have got the smolder test, so they test fabric, and a cigarette, that's a burning cigarette, sits on the fabric for 45 minutes, and if that doesn't go up in flames, it passes. Also, you know, it can't char too long. There's really good data out there about fire scenarios, and I think we can go further than the Americans. I think we could have the smolder test, which is completely simple and thereby much more likely to be complied with. But we could add to that the host of recommendations that there are in, like this recent report of characteristics of domestic fire scenarios, like public awareness campaigns on chargers. Don't stick your charger on a sofa, particularly if you bought it for £3.99 off Amazon, because it overheats. Putting heat cut-off on laptops that sit on top of sofas
And beds.
and consumer having more of a safety control on the consumer electronics and on the white goods. So fridges now have foam in their insulation to, presumably to stop the noise, and that foam is right next door to the ignition source.
Yeah.
And that could be separated by a metal wall. There are so many little steps that the Fire Brigade, far better than me, would put forward suggestions. And I think those suggestions could have a really meaningful impact, whereas these chemical flame retardants, I do not believe are having a meaningful impact.
And that's a good time now to say that we're looking to improve fire safety,
Yeah.
but we're looking for less toxins in the furniture,
Yeah.
and we believe we can do both.
Yeah.
Yeah. Will barrier cloth be the solution for every top fabric with the new regs?
Well, it's a good solution.
It's a simple
Ideal
solution. It's a simple solution.
It's got really good, you know, there are several studies on the, you know, fire performance of barrier cloths, and
But
they're
I
very
think
good.
we need to point out that we're talking about the wall-safe barrier cloth, because obviously the calico-based barrier cloth
Yes.
is chemically treated.
Yes, no, we're talking about the wall safe one.
Yeah, and non-chemically treated,
Yeah.
past the barrier test, yeah.
Yeah.
I think it's a very good proposal, but
What's our request when it comes to labelling? Have we covered that? What's our request when it comes to labelling?
Well, as I say, it's a difficult one because you know they don't quite understand, you know, the situation. They expect that all pieces of furniture have got labels on,
Yeah.
and you know we need to sort of highlight to them that sadly the misconception that, you know, that so much of it does not have labels, and therefore there's the problems there.
And they're expecting the future labels. It's really future labelling. It's very easy for upholsterers to get the information to put on the bottom of a chair going forward,
Yeah.
which we know it isn't.
the labelling generally for manufacturers is absolutely excellent, because it means that if and when a chemical flame retardant is restricted as being, we cannot be using this anymore, then you know that product does need incineration, but it might mean other products don't need incineration. Incineration is not a great result at the end of life of a product. We would much rather it went into the reuse network or was recyclable, and with this labelling we're giving that circular economy a hope. So this labelling is so valuable. What we haven't quite worked out is the best suggestion of how the labelling works for upholsterers, because that's really tricky.
Yeah.
Mm.
What's the future of foam? Tumbleweed.
Yes.
That's an easy one.
Obviously,
Oh.
we can still use foam. Okay, it's chemically treated. It's a petrochemical in itself anyway, and currently the regulations say that we have to have it chemically treated, and then we have to cover it with barrier cloths, or we have to have back-coated fabrics. Hopefully, the larger manufacturers that have got the money to put the research and the development into it, that they will come up with, products, maybe, more denser foams that don't need so much chemical treatment. But they are looking at sort of more biodegradable materials. They're looking at, potentially stuff made with from mushrooms and what have you. It's very early stages at this stage.
Probably quite expensive at the
And
moment
it's
as well.
extremely expensive.
Yeah.
But these things, as things progress,
Evolve,
have you?
yeah.
They evolve, and hopefully we will go down that route. So,
That would be incredible.
yeah. So the regulations are not saying that we cannot use foam, going forward. But if we do use foam, we've got to say what chemicals are in that foam.
Will this impact my business? That's a big question. I think we know the
Yeah.
answer. Who wants to take this one? Who wants to start?
I'll give it a go. So if we can't do bespoke products because we'd have to burn each one, that would be a good chunk of business gone. I don't want to enter panic there. I think that's just
An anomaly.
yeah, I think it's an anomaly. If we have to check for fire labels, and if there's no fire label, and then we have to tell the client, we're sorry, we can't take that, it needs to go to incineration, I think that wipes out half the business. So I think that's an issue that really needs to be talked through. If all of our natural fibres have to be treated with chemical flame retardants, because natural fibres don't get excluded, which is what we want them to be, we don't think natural fibres should be in these regulations any more than a wardrobe should be in them. And then there will be a cost implication because it costs to treat things. Is that enough? The admin is going to be tough.
The admin is the huge one. Yeah. I mean, all of it's huge, but it's just the onus of it falling on the upholsterer is just too much.
It's tough.
Not fair.
Yeah. Robbie, anything on that one? On the impact of your
I
business?
just think a major one for a lot of upholsterers will be the admin.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I can actually see that it would just go, they won't bother.
Yeah.
But that could...
I hate to say that, but I just, unless you make these things simple, I think it will be, as it is now, frankly, by some upholsterers.
I think the simplicity is key. And I think the other thing is looking at the purpose of the labelling, because if the purpose of the labelling is that at the end of the life of the chair, it can be, a decision can be made about whether incineration is strictly necessary or whether it can go into the reuse recycle network, then the labelling has been really valuable. And shouldn't the labelling then rest with the chair, not in a folder in our workroom? Because 10 years down the line, people might not remember who had upholstered it anyway. But I think that just needs more exploring.
I think it's probably over time, so if these regulations come in next year, in 100 years' time, all that labelling and everything will have a bigger impact because you'll know what are in things. So I suppose it's going to take 50 or 100 years to get through all the furniture that exists. So I suppose that maybe they're thinking very, very big picture and circular economy and how you have to keep these sort of materials within that.
But that's an important point as well to mention, what you mentioned, Robbie, about that it's not about, well, I just won't comply. It's respond. Let's make it really simple. Let's explain our businesses. This is our chance since 1988 to get it really right for upholsterers and consumers. So we need to make sure people don't just go, do you know what, I'm not going to follow it. Just please follow it, because actually we could make this so simple and so straightforward, and it is just draft one.
Yeah.
Right, on that note, how can people respond who are not technical?
Okay.
We've made that a lot simpler, haven't we, Delyth?
Well, I hope so. I'm not sure. I hope so. So you could write an email, and it could just be an email about what is important to you. And the email address to write to is on the website eco-chair.co.uk. I think it's, I'm not going to read out the email address, I get it
Oh,
wrong.
it's a huge one, yes.
You could put your signature to a 1.5 page letter we've drafted. You could click through on the EcoChair website and enter the full government consultation and answer the questions that interest you and put in details about your business. You could write them a letter. There is an address for a physical letter. And I'll double check, I'm not sure that's on the website at the moment, but I'll make sure that goes on as well.
You can write to your MP as well, so if you've got a copy of it and ask them on your behalf to bring this up and make them aware of it.
I'm not sure that would actually go through to the
Yes, it
consultation.
It wouldn't, no.
No.
So, you know.
But it's a really good thing to do.
Yeah,
So
as well as.
Exactly, so the 24th, the most important thing is the EcoChair website and the response on there, and then when you've done that, write a letter to your MP.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Do that first.
Because there are the whole law, it splits into two areas. One area is you've not understood an upholsterer's business, and there are lots of things in here that are tricky, and could we please educate you? And the other area is, we know these chemicals are toxic, we know the harm they do, why are you continuing with this model when the other side of your government has clearly recognised there's a massive problem and they need incinerating? If we carry on putting more of these chemicals out into the environment, it's called bioaccumulation, they build up in our bodies. And it's not great.
Yeah, I heard one of the council people at the mattress event, she was saying that to be able to test furniture to see if it has pox in it, you have to get this machine that's like £100,000, you have to wear a hazmat suit, and then you can test the furniture to see if it's got chemicals in it. So it's also not probably the best process, the quickest process to get through to test millions of pieces of furniture. So.
But also, I had a question back here as well about how does it affect my business. We are working with those chemicals on a daily basis. We're consuming, without realising, those chemicals on a daily basis. So that's another reason why, if there is a bit of an attitude out there of it doesn't really affect me, I'll just ignore it, I just won't comply. That's what's so important, because complying or non-complying, which is ridiculous, you will still be consuming the chemicals. So that's so, and I wasn't aware at the beginning. I
But
really
you have
wasn't aware.
been since 1988.
100%, yeah, I agree.
So it's not like now all of a sudden magic buttons pressed and they're all being released.
No, I
You've
know,
been
I know.
working, I don't know how long you've been working.
13 years.
13 years
Yeah.
you've been doing it.
Yeah.
So it's, it could be like an asbestos thing and then like
Yeah.
10
Yeah,
years
no,
time
absolutely.
you're all,
Well,
But we can improve it for the future
Yeah.
upholsterers. Because there is a future.
yes.
Right.
But there is an element in here as well that you get the sort of the old farts like myself who I've been doing it 40 years, it hasn't affected me.
Yeah.
And that will be some of the thinking around this, because they're not thinking about tomorrow, they're only thinking about how it's affected them.
And it has affected them already because they've obviously been consuming these toxins.
Yeah, but the fact of the matter is we don't know.
No, you don't know how it's going to affect you when you're
No,
in
we
your
don't know.
80s and
Yeah,
your
we don't know.
90s.
No, we don't know.
And to be truthful, it will affect children. I think it's a multiple of 20 times more than us. Yeah.
And actually, this is a good point as well to mention. This is not, we're not talking about Crib 5, we're talking about domestic regulations. We're not talking about contract at this stage, we're talking about domestic.
Yeah, it's just the domestic that is up for consultation. So, and also if you go onto the trade page of the AMU website, AMUSF.org, on the trade page, again there are links to Delyth's sign up, or if you want to respond and you want some clarification on some of the questions, there's some answers on there as well.
Lovely. That's our questions. Open it up to you guys. Has anyone got any questions online or in here in the room? There's a lot of people online, I believe.
I've got some online bits.
Oh, good.
I've got some in the room first.
Anyone got a question?
I do. I've got a question about
You might need to speak up.
Sorry. So I've got some questions. You probably can't answer it, but just to put it out there in terms of the replacement of foam, there's things out there that is Texflex that we've been all sort of jumping around about for the last year as an alternative, which apparently is toxic free. Although we're having conversations with that doesn't necessarily mean it is. But I'm just wondering.
I don't think they say it's toxic free. Because it's polyester, it's 100% petrochemical. They say it's inherent fire retardants, which means that they've treated it before it was made into a polyester fibre, and it's made from I think about 80% recycled bottles, which is a good thing. But you can't recycle polyester a second time, so it would have to go to incineration.
I think exploring products that are alternative to foam is a whole nother evening session, and a really valuable one, but I reckon people are probably quite tired.
Any other questions in the room?
Just a quick one. What's the time frame if nothing happens and the draft gets put through as is?
Well, if the draft gets goes through as it is, then they're talking about the regulations would come into force in April 26. So from October the 1st next year, 24, the regulation, the draft becomes official, and then we've got an 18-month period for to bring it forward, so for you to wind down your stock.
Transition period almost.
Yeah, transition.
Yeah.
So for the chemical companies to get themselves together to get the data that is required on these labels, etc. So there'll be this 18 months. But effectively from the 1st of April 26, if it goes through as it is, we'll all have to comply as it is.
But you mentioned, Wendy, earlier the standards. So there's the draft law, and then there's the open flame standard, and that's the size of the flame. Will it be a 3.5 centimetres flame? Will it be a smaller flame? I don't want it to be a flame at all, because I think that's what leads to the chemicals. But that is a separate negotiation that's happening, and we're not party to that at the moment. And so if that doesn't get finalised, the date this all comes in might get pushed back.
Right. But October the 24th is still critical.
Yes,
this year.
You've got a week. You've got a week to respond to this.
Yeah. I mean, and they could decide that after the consultation that they've got so much information and that they need to go back and look at something else. They could put it back.
Yeah.
So
the more responses, the better to push it back.
Well,
not
no, I'd
necessarily.
love the baby products to be excluded
Oh
today.
yes, I thought that was going to happen.
And
I
I'd
thought
love the
that was
labelling.
anyway.
It's all part of, I'd love the labelling to start today because it is super valuable.
Yeah.
And I'd love the baby products to be excluded today.
I agree, yeah.
And this movement to a composite testing which helps the manufacturers to try to design out chemical flame retardants. So those are three really valuable things that we want right now. So it's really tricky because you can't go to an MP and go, I hate this legislation, delay it. Because that's not really in our interest.
Yeah.
It is better than what we've got now.
Yeah.
It's just, it's not better enough.
Yeah.
I'm so sorry to ask this, it's still not entirely clear what we would do. There's no labels on anything before 88, presumably.
We think it's a hold.
Under any circumstance, there's no solution to chemicals in furniture that we want to recover. So we would have to make a proposal to them about what it is that we suggest, because at the moment you can't sell that anyway. Without a label, we cannot sell it. It's all being stripped back or just being neglected. So are we in any way making a proposal about what to do about that? Because obviously it's a bit of a nightmare that this furniture can't be practically refurbished and moved on. But that's been the case already. We're unlikely to go backwards on that.
Well, it's about taking the natural materials out of scope completely, and the use of interliners. The 100% all safe interliners.
Sorry, can I ask a question? I'm deeply conflicted about all of this because I upholster furniture, have done for about 17 years, but I also try and, when I can, and I've got the energy, design and bring to print my own fabrics onto primarily polyester composites. So it's not really a question I'm asking the panel, it's probably just an open question, which is how do upholsterers reconcile the use now of polyester-based fabrics, particularly the ones that are coming on stream which claim to be made from recycled bottles? How do we reconcile the use of these polyester-based fabrics with chemical treatments? I mean, you can't use a polyester fabric, to my understanding, with a barrier cloth on a post-1950s piece of furniture.
No.
So how do you...
Well, then it has to be chemically treated.
Yes, but...
So you know,
So
those fabrics, you know, that polyester has to be bonded to
or woven,
a chemically treated,
or chemical woven into the weave before it's made into a fabric.
Yeah, but in both those cases, that means that upholstery fabric can't be recycled at end of life,
no.
and waste parts of it can't be
But that's,
recycled.
yes, there might be technology and it might be worked out in 10 years or 5 years.
Well, this is the thing.
So it's,
This, I'm just thinking, this obviously is a massive debate that goes beyond just the scope of furniture makers and upholsterers. It goes directly to the fabric suppliers as well. I mean, particularly the ones that want to produce polyester-based products.
They're doing a lot of outdoor ranges,
Yeah.
all of these things, and it's just a way of circumventing the fire.
Well, interestingly, you know, outdoor furniture falls out of scope as long as you put a label on it that says it must not be stored in the house.
You know what's happening then.
Yes, so
That's quite
There's
interesting.
an absolute bloom of outdoor ranges, and it's using this recyclable fabric, which is sort of questionable since the day it was sort of like pushed as an eco product, and but it's all over the place. And of course, the end consumer from a bespoke upholsterer says like that a lot. So that's kind of like why those products are out there. Because there's more polyester out there in kind of like quite high end fabrics than there ever has been. Well, than there has been for a long time. Seems like a real resurgence.
I mean, interestingly, I've just recently been working with a polyester fabric that has been bonded to a barrier cloth, and when you look at it, it looked like the wool safe barrier cloth. Oh, great! But in 4 hours of sewing it on the sewing machine, making up these products and what have you, I had to wash my hands at least a dozen times because it was coming off on my hands all the time. So what it looks like a wool safe, but you could, you know, instantly you could tell that it certainly wasn't, because you don't get that residue from wool safe.
Any other questions?
Go on.
Anyone else in the room?
Let's go online.
We've sort of talked about the US approach, but they're asking on the chat, why, is there a particular reason why we're resisting that approach, going for the smaller test, do we know?
I would love to go for the US approach and then bolster the fire safety by introducing other practical measures that increase fire safety. I would love to.
But do we know why
Why they're not?
Why the government isn't.
Yeah, no.
No.
let's go back to 1988 though, if you've got chip hands and lots of cigarette smoking. You had more live flames and more fires in your homes, but now you don't. So that's another thing that needs sort of re-looking at.
The ignition source is slightly different. You know, it is the the batteries, and candles. We use a lot more candles these days.
More questions for your MP.
Yeah.
And is it in the feedback, the suggestion about this particular test, the US model?
What, is it on the website?
Yes.
Yeah.
And so someone else has said, so a wall-safe barrier prevents chemicals from coming out of the foam.
No, it doesn't. They migrate out of the foam. I mean, the tighter the weave of fabric will slow down their progression, but no, they will come out and they will permeate through.
And I think we've touched upon it already, but there was a question about ultraflex, and I think the same answer is that we can't quite get into all of those points now. check one more time, see if anyone's come in. There's questions about regulation, but again, I don't know that how this is going to be kind of
How trading standards.
in practice.
Well, as I say, it's responding to the consultation. Hopefully they will take it on board, redraft the regulations, the drafts and what have you. And then if it goes through into Parliament and it's signed off, then trading standards will have to write the standards as to how we can make things compliant, what you effectively have to do.
And for people who are feeling active, who are more active than signing the letter, or who are wanting to write to their MP, another option is to speak to your local trading standards and say, we're being pushed by this legislation to do something that we don't think is in the best safety of the children in the homes of our clients. And I think that safety side is being not given a big enough voice right now.
One more question that I thought was good, because I think it's call to action for everyone that's on this call, was that there are thousands of upholsterers that are not online or on the Insta community. How do we get those people engaged in this conversation? And I think it's probably if you know one, tell them.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
If you know one, tell one, and then I'll make sure I put the address to write to, because you can just write an old-fashioned letter.
Yeah.
And are people generally worried about the regulation change? Is that a general consensus?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'd say so.
Trying to make people worried about it.
Yeah, raise awareness for
There's
it.
a lot of, even so, as a training centre for students, we are constantly telling people to be aware of what they're doing in the environment. We're always having discussions in every class. We're talking about the recycling, about the POPs disposal, all of these things. But really, we want every student and every person that we're connected to, I guess, to be realising that it affects them. And I think we're really realising that it's going, obviously, on the social media forums that we are looking at. We're becoming more and more aware all the time, but it's reaching all of the other people, your families and friends and everyone else, to get them involved, because it's what they're buying as general consumers. They have no idea about. So getting furniture companies to get involved as well, and put the smaller ones, the ones that are kind of reputable, and then I guess we just.
And of course, it's those students that are going through now that are going to have to, deal with this going forward.
Training centre, we've talked about every day for the next week, actually, with each class that starts, saying, have you responded? And if not, let's do it at lunchtime, all together, en masse. Let's just sit down and do it.
What's been the feeling?
To answer the questions.
So what's been the feeling when you've been having those conversations? Because that'd be quite interesting.
People are really concerned, but also really confused, because the fire regulations discussions that we already have been doing based on the last regulations are very confusing, and there are loopholes, and they are challenging, and we haven't got all of the answers all of the time for all of the questions, because we're ignorant to some of the facts. And this is why, Delyth, thank you from me and from all of us for all of the research that you have been doing and getting out there, and the exposure that you've been giving it, because it's really complex, and it's vital that this is such a good thing of picking out.
I haven't done it on my own. I haven't understood
obviously,
this
but
on my own. I mean, no, but just to say, I have been working a lot with the Cancer Prevention Society and with FEDRA, who are an environmental charity, and with Silent Night, and with IKEA, and with the Green Science Policy Group in America, who they petitioned for the change in law in America, because they also used to have an open flame test. And 10 years ago, they went, "What? This is madness," and changed it.
And it was it was the governor of California who told it, wasn't it? It was one governor that really got behind it, and change happened.
And we could really do with one MP really get behind it.
Because actually, this isn't going to be debated in Parliament as it stands at the moment, is it? This is just a legislation. It's going to be drafted and redrafted. But actually, if we could get an MP behind it, there's an opportunity for it to go higher up and actually be debated and actually gain some traction and some exposure.
The other thing that I would say is that there's an enormous amount of goodwill. The only disputes really are over small things, and we, as a community, we need to sort of understand that we're all actually after the same thing, And for a lot of us, we're jobbing upholsterers, we want to do our job, but we absolutely, I think it's the same with interior designers. It's the interior designers and the upholsterers that are driving this. The client is way less knowledgeable, of course. They respond to all our stories, whichever the story is. Oh, you're sponsoring craft. Oh, you're, this wonderful design. Oh, you're taking care of like the health and well-being of people that work with furniture and people that live with it. They only care if the specifiers tell them about it. Other than that, they don't. They're interested in the price point. I think the egg thing is an interest. I get it. And I suppose.
But that's awareness you're talking about there.
Yeah.
That's not.
It is.
That's just not being aware.
Yeah.
If we're more aware.
They buy in.
To be fair, that is our job.
It is.
Yeah, that's what we
100%.
do. We sit down with each client and explain the benefits of using particular finishes and how it can better their health. And then you get into the sort of social side of it and helping smaller businesses, so we could get this reupholstered, we could keep the life of this product.
Yeah.
And it engages them and gives them stories to tell other people
The
about.
stories are a sales point actually,
Yeah.
but when I was speaking at the design centre to interior designers, they were saying, we're interested. Our clients are not coming to us and asking for it. When we tell them, they're like, yeah, but it's not. So we have to drive it. It's our industry. We are in fact the specialists. It's not that we have to be all specialists on every detail here, but we have to then rely on other specialists to tell us, chemical compositions and the hazards and the dangers. But we have to educate ourselves. It's all fundamental.
Yeah, but once you start asking those questions and you ask everybody, then when you talk to suppliers, they're like, everyone's been asking me for this information, I need to get this information.
That's right.
So then it
builds
goes on.
across the board.
Yeah.
And to keep the story, all the conversations positive, we haven't got universal agreement on absolutely everything, but I do fundamentally think that it's a thriving industry. We're on the cusp of something very important. We're recycling furniture, we're making products that are cherished and valuable in people's homes.
We're making art.
And art that's very usable. I love this trade because of that. And these are beautiful, cherishable things that we are making, and that is the future. When we don't know about consumption and all the rest of it, like slow use and slow consumption and all that shit, that's the way forward. We can't let this industry die at the hands of, being confused and not working together. And it's wonderful to have you all here and everybody online as well. Hopefully we feel like we're working together and we'll carry on working together, because some of these things will need product development going forward. We're going to change things.
Absolutely.
And the community will have to talk as one and find a way to build consensus when, let's face it, we're all in our little workshops getting a right grump on, because what's our biggest problem is always fabrics. It's always a problem one way or another.
Fabric people.
The making of art is a nice idea, but you wouldn't buy a piece of art to hang on your wall if you thought it was releasing toxic chemicals.
No.
Every day you walk past and smiled at that fabulous piece of artwork, you wouldn't have bought it if you'd have really. And we really are. We think very carefully about what we want to do.
And this should also, like you say, have the information ready to give you on the technical side of all of it.
But affordability is important. If things become so prohibitively expensive, it doesn't matter what we do. We are selling to, an elite like human, and that's it. And quite frankly, I've not got into this trade for that. It's not actually where my heart is at. And so it's still a very privileged situation to have a piece of furniture like reconditioned and reupholstered for you. But nonetheless, we have to be careful, because we want people to still be able to afford our products.
Well, that's the thing of raising the awareness of it, and if people get too scared by it. So when I've been speaking to people and telling them what we're discussing, they're like, what? And then they get a bit panicky, and, and you don't want that to kick in either, and everybody be running around. There's no things to be scared of at the moment without being scared.
Because manufacturers will find an easy way to sell. Oh, we're cool. You know what I mean? They'll find a way to say we've got it all covered and we're doing everything. Whereas the bespoke upholsterer will probably be very transparent, very honest about what they're very open about what they're doing. And our message will be harder to communicate if we're just busy being told, you can't do anything because it's not set. What we do isn't safe. You know, that would just be
Yeah.
yeah, that would be well, obviously that would be damaging and not helpful.
Well, hopefully everybody shares the information and any technological advances passed around and everyone can sort of move together.
Yeah.
It's,
Also, we kind of do want people to be just a little bit scared. I'd like to go and empty the phone cupboard now and never have to use it again. Quite frankly. So we all have to get involved with the whole idea of trying all of the new products as much as possible. And obviously, we're in a position where we can encourage clients wherever possible to go as natural as possible.
Yeah.
Despite the fact that it might cost a bit more, it might take a bit longer to do
But it's
something
more
traditionally.
recyclable, isn't it? It's more
We are in
recyclable.
that world where we are teaching and
But if you offer that as a service to clients, we can do it, or we can do it very well and it'll cost you this much more. And you give that offer because you're probably the most agile of rather than big furniture manufacturers. If you can at least offer it, that's what we say to interior designers. Just be able to say that you can do it. Not everybody will take you up on it, but if they do want it, they'll come to you. It's there.
Any other questions?
Yeah.
Anything else online?
No, I think it's people are a bit worried, and I think it's just what we can positively do now to make changes. We have got that power. We're up against some bigger and scarier, industries than us, and that's I think what people are talking about on here. And so it's just making people feel confident that we have got some power here.
Yeah.
We have, we're agile.
Yeah.
We can all write our names, and every single name we write that
We'll take
it's taken as an individual response. I'm not feeling panicked.
No.
I think we will find a way of solving the business challenges, and I think we will have to push public awareness
Yeah,
on
I think that's
the chemical
Yeah.
content.
I think that's how you get people interested.
Because
in the
unless
health
the general
side of it.
public know, then they've got to be the ones to decide, and we've got to be the ones to educate.
yeah.
I mean, some of the bigger companies are doing that already, but as you say, it's getting the little ones to do it as well. And we're all little ones, as you say, we're all micro.
Yeah.
I mean, Delyth has made it very easy for, if you're in agreement, you can look at the letter and you can add your name, must have an email address, otherwise it doesn't count. And then, as I say, everything counts. Or alternatively, you could go onto the AMU website and you can sort of cherry pick answers and fill in the consultation. Consultations are never written the way we would hope, so trying to weave them in. So we've sort of tried to give examples of how you can weave it in. Cherry pick what's important to you, even if you only fill in, 4 questions, 4 answers to
A response is a response, isn't it?
Absolutely,
Yeah.
take them forward. Or as Delyth says, put it in an email or put it in a letter to them, and the contact details are both the AMU website, the trade page. So when you click on the website, you need to go to trade at the top, and obviously on the eco-chair.co.uk.
Yeah, which doesn't come up unless you actually do eco-chair.
Anyone that's signed up should have that link at the bottom of the email that we sent them today.
Yeah.
And if anyone wants it, obviously we'll share on socials and things.
Yeah.
But get in touch with us. And
We've, it's been shared with members of the Association of Master Upholsterers and new students and the training centres. So, but it's just, if you know somebody and you think somebody is interested at any shape or form, send them, pass that information on.
Any
Can
member.
I ask a question about that? Is it, if you were to sign your name and go on and answer the questions and also write a separate email, is that 3 different, so it's
Not
fine.
necessarily,
No,
no.
one person.
Yeah, one person, one email.
Right, okay,
Okay.
right.
But 3 people in the same house.
I was about to say,
As long as you've got different email addresses.
One more thing, you were mentioning in big business like eBay, for example, and all second-hand trade. So wouldn't they be affected by the new legislation?
As it's drafted,
Yeah,
I think they would, yes.
So
I
would
think
that
this
be
is a huge
a
issue
call
and
to get those
dealers.
people on board and let them lobby, because that's
Go for it. Anyone wanting to contact them, go for it.
Yeah.
the more people contact them, the more they realise that actually.
yeah. Because I've been contacting a few, and when you one message, one DM, one email, it's a drop in the ocean. If several people are highlighting the same thing, it really helps.
Yeah.
Really helps.
So try and get the British Institute of Interior Design to talk about it, and then into Design Declares as well. So we'll be pushing it out as well.
Well, I think your talk, because I went to Death Reps and people said, we had a talk about it, and it's very interesting. So it's obviously filtered through.
Yeah.
And that's, a lot of people were at the show, so.
A lot, yeah.
So, and it was a lot of across the board, it's not just design, it's not just fabric people, it was quite a mixture of people. So.
There was a pink sofa, it was quite scary.
Chemical free?
No, probably not, no.
So that brings us to half-8. That brings us perfectly to an end. I think thank you so much. What brilliant questions. I think we've got through and summarised it in the given time frame, which was always going to be a challenge. So we've done it, we've succeeded. Thank you very much.
Thanks to all the panel members, and thanks for your time and energy and effort as well. Thanks for turning up.
Yeah,
Thanks to Robbie.
Thanks, Robbie.
Glad you were able to make it. This was technologically slick.
It was really slick. I'm impressed.
Right, that's it.
Thank you very much. Thank you everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.